888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. Larry Elder here. We'll be talking with Dr. Sebastian Gorka in just a few minutes. This is kind of a complicated story. An FBI informant is being trashed by the FBI for exposing what he says is the fact that the government knew that the Russians were trying to corner the market on uranium well before they approved the Uranium One deal. He says they knew. And when I started saying something about it, they threatened me, discredited me. He's retained a lawyer, and he's now suing the FBI, claiming that as a whistleblower, I was simply letting people know that this Uranium One deal, the government knew well in advance that it stunk, well in advance that the Russians were trying to corner uranium, yet it went through anyway. Pourquoi? President Trump held a listening session in the White House yesterday, talked to family members, survivors, and others of Parkland. And what he ended up saying is that we ought to harden the target. Fascinating that people accuse the president and the Republicans of not doing anything, and then when you do something, invite people in, hear their ideas, and you disagree, then you're accused of doing nothing. It's called having a disagreement. We're going to be talking about what the president said and what some of the students said. And also, there was a very interesting town hall CNN did, hosted by Jake Tapper. And Marco Rubio was asked to promise not to take any more money from the NRA. The NRA is a lobbying organization. One of the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment is the right to redress grievances. That's a fancy way for saying the right to lobby. It is a special interest group, not unlike the National Education Association, not unlike the PTA. The idea that a politician will take money from the NRA and therefore dance to the NRA's tune, if that were true, why would the NRA spend 1 nickel on Republicans, since Republicans already pretty much support the same position the NRA supports? They would be giving the money to Nancy Pelosi. They'd be giving the money to people like Andre Carson, Keith Ellison, because after all it is writing somebody a check and they'll do what you want them to do. Oops, I guess it isn't all that you want to. I guess it isn't that easy, is it? One of the things I'm going to talk to Dr. Gorka about are the latest developments in the Trump collusion investigation. The indictment of the 13 Russians said that there's no evidence that whatever they did altered the outcome of the election. No evidence that whatever they did altered the outcome of the election. And they spent a few $1 million putting fake ads in Facebook, having fake accounts on Twitter, and retweeting certain fake things. Right? How stupid do they think we are? Do you really think that the effect of these Russian bots, these Russian agents that were interfering with our election, had anything like the effect on the election that our in-the-tank left-wing media had? Anything even close? I've told you this before. Investors Business Daily had a piece about the front page headlines in newspapers around the country during the re-election campaign of George Herbert Walker Bush, 1992. October, a month before the election, they looked at a selection of the front page stories about business stories in our newspapers, and 90% of the news was negative, even though we were in about the 15th or 16th consecutive month of positive economic growth. We were in no way, shape, or form in a recession. Yet a plurality of Americans believe we were in a recession. 90% of the news was negative. Month later, Bill Clinton gets elected. It's now November 1992. Only 14% of those newspapers that had stories about the economy on their front pages, only 14% of them had negative news stories. Now you tell me what impact that had. Bombarding the economy to the point where a plurality of people assumed that we were in a recession when we weren't even anywhere close to a recession. What about that documentary that came out a few years ago about the Bill Clinton era? Supposedly a PBS-produced documentary of warts and all. We've talked about this. And on occasion after occasion after occasion during this hours-long documentary, people said that Bill Clinton inherited a recession. We inherited a recession, says one member of his cabinet. We inherited a recession, and the voiceover says, and then the recession was beginning. Are you kidding me? 14, 15, 16 consecutive months of positive economic growth. The last quarter GDP was almost 3.8% for George Herbert Walker Bush, his last quarter. Every single quarter of his final year was 3% growth or better. And yet a plurality of the American people assumed that we were in a recession. Why? Because of our left-wing media. And you want to tell me that you think these Russians had a greater effect on how people think and feel and vote than our left-wing media does? Grow up. I'm skeptical about everything I read. I don't care whether it's Fox or whether it's MSNBC Hee-Haw. I'm always skeptical. The other day I saw an article about one of these teenagers at Parkland, the one named Hogue, and there was a picture of him at a school in California or standing in California talking about a disaster that took place in California, and there was a picture of this guy. The first thing I said to myself is fake news. I haven't seen any other legitimate publication mention this, any other publication I consider to be legitimate. And sure enough, nobody else repeated it. It went away. It was fake news. When something is extraordinary, jaw-dropping, nobody else is reporting it, the people reporting it is some outlet you never heard of, I think the average person is skeptical, don't you? Or should be. And one of the things I thought that Donald Trump has contributed to the conversation, even though I know that people on the left don't like the idea of people being deeply, deeply skeptical about the news, it's undermining our republic, I think it's healthy to be skeptical. I think it's healthy that Donald Trump has put the media under a microscope. I think it's healthy to point out that people on the left, our left-wing media, people like Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer refer to illegal aliens as undocumented. What did George Orwell say? You shape the way language is, you shape the way people think. It's important to talk about this. It's important that we have organizations like Newsbusters, the Media Research Council, that looks at stories on ABC, NBC, CBS to find out that October, November, December, 90% of the news about Trump was negative, 90%. Meanwhile, stock market hitting record highs, trillions of dollars in brand new wealth created. Consumer confidence hasn't been this high in years. People, for the first time in years, are saying the economy is good or excellent, but 90% of the news is negative. I thought it was the economy stupid. I thought the primary reason that people voted was because of the economy. Well, if the economy is doing well, how can 90% of the news be negative? Even Van Jones in that Project Veritas undercover video referred to the Trump collusion thing as a, quote, nothing burger, close quote. And they've got a field producer who says in a conference call with Jeff Zucker, the CEO of CNN, he said, great job on that story now, guys. Let's get back to Russia. Let's get back to Russia. If you can't find a story, manufacture one. What the hell is that? The executive editor of New York Times, Dean Baquet, said, and I quote, the left, as a general rule, does not want to hear thoughtful disagreement, close quote. And you think the Russians are a bigger threat than our left-wing media to our republic? We come back, President Trump's remarks, and some exchanges from the town hall. Pretty interesting exchange between Dana Lash, a spokeswoman for the NRA, and the sheriff of Broward County, who feels there should be further gun control. She says, why don't you guys take further action when you have these warning signs, these red flags? I'm Larry Elder.
Call in now and